Never applying positive feedback to an element that is essentially random, because that fools the player into thinking that they did something significant. I guess the question...
I feel like the last tip and this tip are at odds with each other.
Let's see if we can mesh these two ideas.
I would not consider Minecraft emergent gameplay.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what emergent systems are there?
The sandbox itself allows people to create stuff that the designer themselves did not intend.
Sure, it's a creative tool. It's not emergent gameplay.
Breath of the Wild, good example of this, is that you have a long-term goal. Ganon is a problem. You have to defeat Ganon.
It can be a short-term goal if you want to go beeline for Ganon.
Yeah. I mean, I would still say it's a long-term goal because it's the overarching thing that you're supposed to achieve in the game.
Sure.
But
if you want to play the game and just beeline straight for Ganon with your wooden stick, you can do it.
Alex, are you all ready for class?
I am not. I didn't like school.
You didn't?
Wait, I didn't mind school, but you know. I would like to skip this class. I'll see you later.
Oh darn. Wait.
Okay, I came back to class.
Oh, okay, good. I was worried there for a minute. You're not gonna get credits for this if you just walk away.
That's fine.
Okay. On this episode, though, we are going to be talking a little bit about some basic design stuff, a little 101 time. But before we get into that, hey, welcome to Total Pebble Knockdown, everybody. I will be one of your assistant teachers, your TAs.
I think
Nathan.
Teacher would be an egregious term to use for us.
What are we? We're the ones taking notes in the back of the room. Monitors, right?
I've got my head down napping on the desk while you take notes, apparently.
Oh, perfect. Well,
I learned through osmosis.
School all over again. Anyway, I'm your official note taker, Nathan.
And I am sleeping right now, and I'm Alex.
Perfect. I wanted to go over some basic game mechanics tips for folks. And I came across an article that is from the one and only Will Wright. Have you ever heard of him?
Of former Maxis fame, I assume?
Yes.
Creator of The Sims.
The Sims. SimCity, and pretty much anything that had Sim in front of it, he probably had a hand in.
Sim Ant, my favorite.
Yeah, remember Sim Ant? Great, good times. But anyway, yes, that Will Wright. He did a masterclass, which was about game design and game mechanics. And he, very helpfully, in an article, wrote about 5 tips for writing game mechanics. And I thought that we would just look at those 5 and see if they're any good advice. I mean,
Sure.
It's Will Wright, so I'm going to assume that they must have worked okay for him.
Maybe. What's he doing these days?
Chillin' in the world of The Sims, probably.
Maybe.
Anyways, let's in a simulation.
Let's see what he wrote.
His first tip is to work backwards. So, he says, when selecting game mechanics, think about the experience your game is creating. Then work backwards to find the mechanic that will improve that experience. Sometimes that means borrowing a common mechanic from another game, and sometimes it means creating your own. Have you ever tried working backwards when you were doing, like, game design and working out the mechanics of a game? Like start at the end and then go backwards?
I mean, start with the mechanic and then work backwards from it entirely?
No. He's saying think about the experience that you're creating, and then you work backwards after you realize what you're trying to get to at the end. So like you know what kind of game you want to build, and then you work backwards to get the mechanics that support that end goal.
It's not a bad approach, absolutely. Because if you know like the experience and the desired outcome you have, then you can figure out ways to tailor the mechanics to fit that. You know?
Sure. Okay. Like, me personally, since I don't design games myself, that is a little bit of a foreign concept, but I know that sometimes when I'll write, I kind of start at what is the message or the resolution to this story before you even start figuring out what your characters and the basic concept of the thing is, because you want to know that at the end you're going to get the experience, you're going to get the message across that you were looking to get to. So
yeah, you don't start a story and go, I don't know where it's going to end up. You kind of, I assume you don't anyways.
Some people might.
But like,
Some
you want to
writers
have an
might.
idea of the story overall, and you have what your end goal is, and so you figure out how you want to get there.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's the same thing when you're designing quests, I think, in D&D or tabletop games. Same thing as when you're designing mechanics for tabletop games or systems you want to add or make.
Sure.
Like, I want to have a system where you can build stuff and make it easy. So I work backwards. Well, what do you need to build stuff? I need the resources. Which resources do I need? So you kind of go, all right, being able to build things with this, like a wood building, you need this, that, and that. How should you get it? You kind of work just backwards. Like, you're playing the game in reverse, essentially.
Right. I can understand that, especially for things that are like puzzles or mazes too. I like, every time I think about building a maze of my own, my first thought is you have to start at the end, and you have to path your way backwards, and then work your maze out from there. Have you ever seen that? Where it's like you have a hedge maze, right? Or something like that, and you say, okay, what I'm going to start with is, here's my endpoint, and I'm going to draw the path that gets me out of the maze. And then we just build everything out from that. So you know that you have a path that will take you there, and then everything else just expands out from that. But you've already completed your main goal. So it's something like that. Puzzle design, this is very helpful for. But just generally in your storytelling, and this, of course, doesn't just apply to video games, this applies to tabletop as well. You want to create a certain experience with your system or your game, you're going to start there, and then you're going to work your way backwards to the steps that are going to get you there. So, perfectly good piece of advice that we don't really talk about very much. Number 2, study other mechanics. Always a good one. The best way to get good at using game mechanics is to start recognizing them in other games. Play games with an analytical mind, break each system down into its component parts, and eventually, you'll see how many mechanics are shared across games and systems. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah,
Strive
sorry,
to become a
I'm not gonna play a game to do an analysis of the mechanics, generally speaking.
But
I don't enjoy doing that.
But you would do that when you're playing tabletop games, wouldn't you? Like, you have done that before.
Only when I'm trying to figure out something. I'm not gonna, like, play a game to dissect its mechanics. Although I do notice them and comment on them. It's not, like, I don't do a deep analysis of them when I play it, because I'm not playing it for that reason. But, like, sure, I'll go, this is a weird system. Why is it that? It's kind of like, I think when we were talking about Neo, maybe?
Oh, okay.
I was like, this system is neat because you can have high, low, and mid stance, and you can do different weapon combos in different ways. So it kind of gives you a variety of offense and defense and ways you can dish it out. And
certainly
changes the play style even within the one weapon set, for instance. Interesting mechanic. Did I do a deep analysis of it? No. I noticed it was a thing and whatnot.
He does. This last sentence, though, kind of goes to what you were saying, though, is strive to become a mechanics collector, gathering things from here and there that you'll eventually use in your own design. So in similar fashion, you know, where you see a system that's really interesting, that stands out, you take note of that and say, oh, that would be interesting if it was put into this other thing, or if we used it here. You know, I'll see systems that I think are neat in existing ones. I think I've already talked about, like, Surge 2, which I went back and played recently, and that has that whole thing where, you know, it's a Souls-like and it has a lot of those mechanics, but then it also has that neat system where you can do finishing moves, cut off limbs, and get schematics for the pieces of armor and weaponry that the enemies used in the game, which is just a unique system that you didn't see elsewhere. Or in Lies of P, which I had been playing recently, where you can collect weapons, but they're separated between, like, the heads and the shafts, so that you can mix and match them, so you can get different effects that you can utilize together. These are just neat systems, and I suppose as long as it's not like the Nemesis system, which has some legal... I guess it's not in as much legal hot water as it used to be to use the Nemesis system.
Not really sure what happened with that, but probably still.
Because they are using it for some other games, but as long as the mechanics aren't apparently, like, copywritten or trademarked, I guess you can...
You can still take from them, you just can't use them verbatim.
That's true. I think that what's interesting here, though, is, like Will Wright is saying, playing games with an analytical mind. I don't necessarily think, like you were saying, that you have to play games with an analytical mind, but I do think that it's useful to be observant about specific things that you think are really interesting in games, and how they interact with the systems, because I will often, like, take a step back afterward and look at, like, why things worked or didn't work for me, and say maybe it was because they implemented this or this or this, and it would be cool to see that again, and then you recognize it when you play another game, and you see that that's in that system. So, yeah. Number 3, incorporate probability. Many game mechanics will use some form of probability or randomness. A simple dice roll is an example. Use randomness when you want to create interesting variability in play or add tension to a certain moment within your game. So it's RNG stuff, basically. I have a 20-sided die. How much probability, though? Serious question for you. How much probability do you actually want in your gaming?
Depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
Our default, it depends.
Yeah, take a shot.
In a shooting game, for instance, you probably don't want a lot of probability going on, because if you're aiming your gun in the right spot, you don't want the bullet going over there when it should be over here, for instance. Probability factor in that would come down to if there's any spread to your shots or recoil or something like that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a cone that you're aiming in, and you're whatever, like a shotgun, the probability to hit, etc., etc. Dice rolls are fine. It's usually not a giant pool.
Sure.
For instance, it's not like you're doing 1d100 with a dice roll of a d20. For instance,
I would love to see a system where their, like, attacks do, like, 1d100 damage, and that's just for enemies and for you, and just see the wild swing.
Like in Rogue Trader, which I've been playing again because it came out. For instance, that uses a D100 system, but you're rolling under a percentile. So it's not like you're rolling 1 to 100 and just take whatever number you get. It's you're rolling 1d100 and you're taking under your score is a success. So if I have a 35, anything under a 35 is success. So it's not even bad. So yeah, probably how much do you want? You want enough to make it interesting, I think.
Sure.
But you don't want so much that it becomes unreliable for things you want to be reliable. Again, headshots should not be probability, they should be skill.
Yes, yeah. There's certain games where probability is just not going to work, especially games that are about strategy. Games like chess really can't have probability to them. They have to have very specific movement and function. Some puzzle games, or a lot of puzzle games, will actually not want to have probability. I don't need randomness when I'm trying to solve an actual puzzle with one specific answer to it. Which may go a little bit into the idea of, like, Emergent or linear gameplay, which we're going to get into in a different segment, but I feel like that does depend heavily on what kind of game that you're building. For most games, though, it's perfectly fine to do so. I just wouldn't want to see probability in a game like, let's say, Super Mario, because when I bump the little Goomba on his head, I want to know that the Goomba is dead, and not that I critically failed, fell over, and then the Goomba eats me. You know, that's...
Yeah, that's not ideal.
Yes. So maybe not great in all cases. Okay, moving on. 4. Don't reward randomness. Never apply positive feedback to an element that is essentially random, because that fools the player into thinking that they did something significant. Similarly, if you apply randomness to moments that are supposed to be precise and vital to success, the game begins to feel arbitrary. Instead, introduce small, mathematically simple elements of chance throughout your game. Those elements will play against one another and eventually present as game intelligence to the player.
So what was the last one?
Incorporating probability.
Yeah, so you want probability, but don't reward randomness. Probability is randomness.
This is true. Never applying positive feedback to an element that is essentially random, because that fools the player into thinking that they did something significant. I guess the question...
I feel like the last tip and this tip are at odds with each other.
Let's see if we can mesh these two ideas. Okay, so probability, if we're talking about user input having a not necessarily firm output, could be seen as what Wright is saying about incorporating probability. If he's talking about randomness in the idea of just random stuff that can happen, shouldn't necessarily be rewarded. I can almost see what he's talking about there, like, but if you're adding in any of these elements, I think it's hard for that to work. Like, if I said, well, there's this giant hole in the ground in my landscape, and boy, if one of the enemies like trips and falls into the hole and then plummets 50 feet and dies, that's kind of a reward for me.
Yeah, I guess it really comes down to what you're classifying as a reward for randomness.
Yeah.
Because random encounters in D&D, for instance, a lot of people don't necessarily like them these days. Some people still do. But if you have a random encounter and you survive the combat, you get experience. The experience is a reward for surviving and defeating the combat. Or if they drop any loot, for instance, that is a reward.
Right.
You've earned loot. Or even more, for instance, go back to the 3-5 days. If you're rolling on random loot tables and you roll high on the loot table, you know, there's probability, random chance of you getting a very cool epic item.
Sure.
If you use those tables. So randomness can have rewards.
Right.
So it just really depends on what you want to classify as a reward for randomness. Opening a loot box, randomness, also reward, also totally gambling addiction stuff. But that's not the point.
Right. Maybe that's what he means by don't reward randomness. So
like randomness can have a reward. I think it just should not be more tangible than a reward that you get from something satisfying.
Right. What he says in this piece is if you apply randomness to moments that are supposed to be precise and vital to success, the game begins to feel arbitrary. So, I mean, we could say that maybe he's saying that there are places where probability mechanics, random number generation works, and there are some places that need precision where that randomness is not going to work, but I don't think it's phrased very well between these two.
This is a masterclass?
This is a masterclass. Well, to be fair, even Ninja had a masterclass.
Hold on. Yeah, we don't talk about that. I want someone to do a video game. It's a platformer, but every time you jump, the intensity of your jump varies on a scale between 1 and 100.
Every gravity
time, different, random
changes.
jumping strength.
Yeah, the gravity changes. Perfect.
Yeah, essentially. So, well, I guess not gravity. Gravity stays the same. I mean, gravity could change too, but gravity stays the same. So the speed of your fall, always going to be the same. Speed of your jump, always going to be the same. The distance and power of your jump changes. So sometimes you'll jump like this and go. Other times you go, boom. I think it'd be hilarious trying to do that. And this would be the randomness that you don't want to make for things that require precise gameplay.
Yes, yeah. Can you imagine if you introduced a randomness or a probability to, like, a Mario game? Where they're trying to do these precise movements so that you can get to, like, the moon or the star or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's just like, nope, sorry, Mario trips.
If you want randomness like that in your gameplay, there are mods for Skyrim that add in randomness. Everything randomized.
And Skyrim wasn't random enough.
Well, it'll randomize enemies or loot. Everything beyond that, it's insane.
Yeah.
I think Spiffing Brit did a video on it, so
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So let's see how number 5 actually plays with the previous points, because I feel like there might be a little bit of a push and pull here. 5. Give players more control. Allow players to mitigate randomness in your game by giving them access to tools that influence probability. For example, if you're building a digital card game that relies on random draws, allow your player to build their own deck. If you're building a war game that detects hits and misses by using a probability table, let players add equipment that improves their probability. This way your player has control and agency over how randomness affects the game's state, and their failures won't feel arbitrary.
Yeah, that just seems like basic.
That does seem basic. I mean, I guess this kind of plays into the not rewarding randomness only because the players are then going to have some control over that, and will get better results. Yeah, but I guess the idea is that if the players have more control, that randomness, the probability of it gets mitigated because you're strategizing to minimize
it. Feels like it gets mitigated. It gives you better odds, but the inherent randomness of a dice roll means it doesn't matter what your odds actually are unless they're 100%.
Right. But like if we'll go to D&D for a minute. If you're playing a fighter and you get the ability, I don't remember what it is, but it increases your critical hit range. You know what I mean? So it's like it doesn't just hit on a 20, it hits on a 19 or an 18.
Mm-hmm.
The randomness is still there, but you have improved your odds of getting a critical hit because of how you've built it, and the player controls how they're building that.
Sure. You feel like you have more of a chance to crit.
Right.
You technically have a better chance to crit.
Yes.
You have 2 of those numbers on the dice instead of just 1. So instead of 1 in 20 chance, you have a 2 in 20 chance.
You've doubled your odds, yes.
You doubled your odds. The fact that dice rolls are not based on probability, like, actually, and they are purely random, means that, yes, if you roll the dice 20 times, you might get 2 crits.
Right.
You might get 15 crits.
Right.
You might get 0 crits.
Right. And it is possible with random number generation that will happen regardless of whether you have increased your critical hit range or not. Yeah. It's more likely to happen if you've done that work. So maybe so I guess in some ways, yes, you're giving players control, but there is a bit of the players feel like they have more control than anything else.
It's the illusion of control.
Randomness will do that.
Which is why I enjoy dice mechanics, because you can give players things to adjust their odds, make them feel better, and make them strategize in certain ways that, they have a bit more of an edge. They have more chances to succeed than to fail now. But, again, the inherent thing with dice is that they're random. The inherent thing with any number system that's based on randomness means it doesn't matter if you have a 99% chance of success, you have a 1% chance of failure, and you can fail often.
Right. Right. Now, you know, your bell curve would suggest that the median outcome is most likely, but again, there is no guarantee
There are always
of that.
outliers.
There's always going to be outliers.
What was
That's
it?
right.
There's a lady, I don't remember what game it was. She was playing, craps or something?
Oh, yeah.
And what was that? You have to throw the dice
Yeah,
a certain way?
Yeah.
And I think she went for 600 rounds or something like that, winning. It was something stupid insane.
It happens.
But it's the probability of this happening, she could have won the lottery 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
But it's that doesn't happen very often.
Right. It's very uncommon to see, but theoretically can happen.
Yeah, it's the thing when they say, technically, to shuffle a deck of cards the same way twice in a row, it has a bigger set of odds than the number of stars in the galaxy or something like that.
Right, because you're shuffling 52 cards, so you're doing 52 by the 52nd power of being able to have different...
100%. That is really not likely to happen, but could it happen randomly? 100% it could absolutely happen randomly.
Sure. The thing I would say, though, Will Wright mentions the digital card game that relies on builds. I can see, though, if somebody said, I don't understand anything about the mechanics of, Magic the Gathering, and just put a bunch of random cards in there, there is a very likely possibility that there will be literally no way for them to actually play the game, because they will not have the lands or the ability to produce mana to even get cards out if they just throw a bunch of random crap in there. And so I can understand why you'd want to give your players a little bit more control, but once they understand the fundamentals of what the game does, so that they know how to get control. Otherwise, you're just leaving them there with a blank slate, and they're probably going to fail because they don't understand the basics.
Right.
But anyway, well, those were the 5 points that were the basic tips that Will Wright gives for writing game mechanics. And I think that they're okay, but they do kind of contradict themselves a little bit.
A little bit. I think they're fine tips. They're very basic tips.
Yes.
To anyone that's been looking into game design, I feel like they would be well, yeah, that just makes sense.
Sure.
Although, again, I maintain that the probability one and the randomness one are butting heads a little bit based on the fact that probability and randomness are both linked very heavily and both just kind of...
Yeah. I imagine that this, like I said, this is a Masterclass article that Will Wright had for his video series, I believe. And so they're probably trying to take people from 0 to 100. You know, they're trying to take them from the ground floor, not knowing anything. And it's probably pretty good advice for people that have no previous experience with this. As a bit of a grounding. But I think just because we've talked about this for so long, we see where some of this can contradict itself and cause problems when rubber hits the road. I'm sure it's fine to start out with, because then people find out about it on their own when they start to implement this stuff. But overall, though, perfectly fine advice for newcomers, at least something for them to think about.
Yeah.
You know. But at any rate...
If you have thoughts about this, especially about probability and randomness...
Yes.
Let us know down in the comments below or on our Discord channel.
And if you happen to know of another game designer that decided to do this exercise, and you think their list was better, please let us know about that too. I'd be perfectly happy to hear if somebody else has done a similar exercise of just some basic writing tips. Maybe Ken Levine did. I'd like to listen to that. That'd be fun.
There you go.
Cool. Alex, you were still awake after our first course. So I thought... Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. He's getting drowsy. I gotta keep him alive. Hey, Alex. We got a second class. We got a second class.
All right,
we gotta
let's go.
to. Okay. I wanted to talk.
Let's get this bread.
We are not playing I Am Bread. Sorry.
Yeah.
However, what I did want to talk a little bit about was linear versus emergent gameplay. Chances are, if you have played any game, whether it be in tabletop or video games, you have experienced these two different types of gameplay. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that today. Now, the interesting thing is, I started looking up, I wanted to find good examples, right, of this linear versus emergent gameplay. And for some reason, the little AI assistant automatically starts typing away when I do that. to say, like, here's a bunch of things, we aggregated a bunch of information from a bunch of places.
Great. Thanks, AI assistant that I'm never going to use myself.
And ultimately, and this is maybe a gripe I have with the different ones that they have, is they'll cite like 4 different sources, but then you see that they've only earmarked like one of them for the entirety of it. But anyway, I figured these are perfectly a few examples of the different kinds of gameplay that we can look at least. So, linear games. Mario's a great example of that. There's a specific way that you go through that game that the developers want you to go through, and there's a point A to point B. There's a set path. Largely similar gameplay. And then you basically have those sort of games. I would say that Souls-likes in a lot of ways actually fall into this, because there are specific pathways that you have to go down, and then there are specific roadblocks that you have to pass in order to get to the next thing.
Well, except for Elden Ring.
Except for Elden Ring, which is probably more of the emergent gameplay we're going to get to in a second. So, my Bing assistant... Yes, Bing.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's why you're having issues.
That is why I'm having issues. Has 4 examples that they give, and I'm going to take issue with one of them. But anyway, Half-Life 2, Halo 3, Mass Effect 2, and Plague Tale Requiem.
These are... Okay, 3 of those are very similar games.
3 of those are very similar games. One of these is not like the others.
Yeah.
But anyway, so for people who are not aware, Half-Life 2 has a level progression. Halo 3 has a level progression. Plague Tale Requiem has a level progression. They pretty much go through singular spaces where your goal is very straightforward. You kind of have to get from point A to point B, and you know how to do point A to point B through the pathing, and then you move on to the next one. Mass Effect 2 is an odd one to put into that.
Yeah, don't you have the ability to kind of go wherever you want, whenever you want in that one?
I think what they're thinking of is that in Mass Effect 2, you have a set, like, quest line of different goals to do. It's mostly about collecting all of the people that are going to go on that suicide mission with you. So you do have quests that are fairly linear, and loyalty quests that are fairly linear, and then there are beats between them that are the main mission, the main storyline pieces. But the game also does allow you to move between different areas. I think the reason why they would refer to it as linear versus emergent will become more apparent when we talk about emergent gameplay, but you do have options as to how you progress through the game, but the story beats are all there, where you do have linear story pieces from one place to another. So I kind of understand that, but it's just odd to throw it in with the other 3.
I think, not that we're completely there yet, I think if you want to talk even better about linear versus emergent gameplay, we could talk about our love-hate relationship difference with certain brands of RPGs between the East and the West.
You know what? We'll do that after I tell you what it generated for emergent ones, and we'll
Okay.
I think that will be a much better way to talk about this. But anyway, so emergent gameplay. Basically, this is game design that allows for complex situations to emerge from the interaction of relatively simple game mechanics. Let me see if I can AI that for you.
Debug this.
Basically, mechanics that are set up in the game that the designer does not specifically think the player is going to utilize in the way that that's put into place. And so they give 4. These are a more interesting set, I think. Deus Ex, System Shock, Minecraft, Dwarf Fortress.
I would not consider Minecraft emergent gameplay.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what emergent systems are there?
The sandbox itself allows people to create stuff that the designer themselves did not intend.
Sure, it's a creative tool. It's not emergent gameplay.
No?
No.
No.
Like, yeah, you can do whatever you want in it. You can build a functional phone in it. You can build a calculator that works in it, I guess.
Right,
but that's
right.
a building tool. It's not gameplay.
Okay, that's an
To
interesting
me,
way to
that
look
is-
at.
that
Okay,
is a
okay.
building tool.
Yeah, I can
That
understand
is me going into a game and building a working Game Boy that plays Pokemon Red,
Yeah.
which they have done in Minecraft because Redstone, and you can make circuits, you can make
Yeah.
full-ass circuit boards. People do it, but they do it in creative mode. It is no longer them playing the game the way it was intended. It is them using the tools in the game as a creative tool to build the things.
So let's talk about Minecraft in the actual like story mode then, or it's not the story mode. That's a different game entirely. But
Just the survival mode.
in the survival mode, something that it does do is allow you to build things that the designer would not have normally intended and use the systems. Like some things can be set on fire, some things can be flooded. You can use different blocks to do different things, and the designers themselves don't necessarily suggest that that's how you move through the game.
There's no suggestion for you to move through the game at all.
Right.
I could make a dirt house
Mm-hmm.
and then build a wheat farm,
Yeah.
and I'm good. That's all I do. Game,
Perfect.
that's all. That's the entire thing. That's how I want to play it. It's open end. It's open end to the point that you can do anything you want. There are no story beats you have to hit. There is no emergent story in the game. There's no quests unless you count
Getting
killing
to
the
the
end
Nether.
dragon as a quest.
Yeah. The Ender Dragon is like the big
But
thing.
the game doesn't tell you that you have to do it.
Right. But that's sort of the point, though. You don't have a set goal in mind when you get into the game itself.
It is a sandbox. It is a creative tool. You can use this game to express yourself however you would like.
Right. But that does sound kind of emergent.
No, it sounds like a sandbox.
A lot of sandboxes can have emergent gameplay,
Sure.
but
I
with linear
guess.
elements. I mean, there are
no
some
linear elements in Minecraft.
Okay. But if it's not...
The only thing
Yeah.
that I would consider a linear element in Minecraft would be going from wood to stone to iron to diamond.
the survival crafting mechanics. Yeah.
That just the tool making.
Right. Deus Ex makes sense to me, even though it does have level progression, because there are many different ways that you can actually address a situation, and a lot of them are probably not intended by the designer, because I know that if I have the right abilities, I can stack a bunch of boxes on the backside of the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island, go up 3 different floors, bypass a bunch of things, and, the designers might have thought about that as a possibility, but it was not specified that this is the kind of thing that I'm supposed to do, and it's not the only way I can address the situation. I could shoot out all the cameras and go in guns blazing, I could stealth kill everybody on the island, and there's probably a lot of ways that I could do it that the designers didn't intend. I have not played Dwarf Fortress, so I can't really speak to that one.
I have. The issue with Dwarf Fortress to me is that there's no real tutorial that tells you things. It's very much in the vein of pre-Minecraft games that here you need a wiki article to play this.
Right. And I don't know if if it necessarily... I think that there's just a lot of randomness to Dwarf Fortress, so...
Yes.
From what I've seen.
It's the emerging gameplay comes from the things that happen in the game, such as leaving beer out and the cat getting into the beer and then the cat getting a beer addiction.
Right.
That's things that have happened. My Dwarf Fortress, sorry, it's just on Minecraft, definitely has emergent gameplay because the things you do reflect on the things that happen from that.
Okay.
And vice versa.
Okay. I see. So
if I dig a wall, and suddenly there's water on the other side of it, and I dig the wall out in Dwarf Fortress, it's gonna flood into my caves or my home or whatever like that.
Right.
You know, the same thing. I guess the same thing would happen in Minecraft if you dig into it.
Yeah.
But you have a much faster reaction speed to that generally in Minecraft, whereas Dwarf Fortress, it's like, oh shit, now I gotta tell the dwarves to build a wall there, and then they gotta come down here into this flooding chamber if they all didn't just die.
Right. I mean, I guess what they're kind of suggesting here is that even though you can react faster to it, it does have an emergent element because when you interact with those systems, things might happen that the designers didn't intend. Even if I can, patch it quickly. Dwarf Fortress, obviously your decisions are going to have more severe consequences because you can't quickly adjust. In Deus Ex, which, again, one of my favorite games, in Deus Ex, the things I do in Chapter 1 are going to directly affect how things unfold in Chapter 2, 3, 4, etc. But it does have a bit of linearity because you move from one mission to another, and there are specific goals that you have to achieve in Mission 1, 2, and 3. Until I figure out who the leader of... Until I deal with the leader of the organization at Liberty Island, I can't move on to the next chapter. Like, that is a linear element in an otherwise emergent game. So they do interact with each other. They can interact with each other. But as you were saying, maybe it makes sense a little bit more to talk about the East versus West kind of RPGs and how those function. Because I would normally say that the traditional, and I say traditional just because everyone's borrowed from everyone at this point, but when you traditionally think of like a Japanese RPG, they do have fairly linear systems for progression.
Yes, and very linear stories up to a specific, like generally like the first 2/3 of the game is pretty linear for them.
I've played Final Fantasy 13. The first 30 hours
literally linear.
Very, very linear.
Also, go check out that great video about the difference between Final Fantasy 13 and 10. Great video. Forget who it's by. Sorry.
We'll try to find it for you.
It's a design doc, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was linear gameplay and the difference in Final Fantasy 10 and 13, which are both 100% linear games up to like 2/3 in, but they feel incredibly different.
Oh, yeah, I'd be interested in that myself because...
oh, good. You can find it and link it here later.
Perfect. 13 was so linear to me, and the only reason why I stuck with it is because people said, after 30 hours, it really opens up, and I was like, okay, I'll stick with it.
After 30 hours, it opens up, but the 30 hours to get there are a slog.
And what they don't tell you is that after you get through that 30 hours, it's just a big open hub where you have to grind out until you can just say, I want to do the end of the game now.
See, the difference, you can watch the video, but
I'll watch the difference.
10 does essentially the same thing, where the first 30 hours is fairly linear, but it's not literally a linear corridor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's very different environments. You get to explore the world. It is just you're going from place to place on a journey. You go watch the video. Tell me how you like it.
Yeah.
10 was good.
10 was good.
13, I put down after like 7 hours.
Yeah. 15 I finished. 15 is the one I finished. So
10 I have over 300 hours in.
Sure, yeah. 15 I actually finished, and 15 was good because from the outset it actually is much more open. Like, it starts very open and allows you to go in different places.
Yeah.
But at any rate...
So, and then...
Yeah.
Eastern RPGs. Eastern? Western RPGs, we're the West, thank you.
Yeah.
Depending where you are in the world, I guess we're the West.
I guess so.
Western RPGs are typically a bit more open.
Yes.
They're usually more open world RPGs, such as, I'm sure you would say Skyrim.
Yeah, and it's not even that Skyrim is open. Skyrim creates systems, like they were talking about for Emergent RPGs, that you may not use the way the designers intended, maybe because there were so many glitches you could exploit in Skyrim.
Well, and the other thing with Skyrim, for instance, we're going to use that as an example, because it is a very
good
emergent game, honestly. There are ways to do quests that the game does not tell you can do that you wouldn't think you can do, and if you don't try it, you're not going to know about it.
Right.
Nathan, you ever joined the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim?
Yes, I did.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Which one of the people in that building did you murder so you could do it?
I don't remember. I don't think... Did I? I don't think I did.
Yeah, you have to
Oh.
join it. You get kidnapped, and then
Probably the most annoying one.
Sure.
Was it was there the clown dude? I want to say maybe that.
No,
clown...
that's in the Dark Brotherhood. So I'm talking about to join it. Astrid kidnaps you and says you have to.
Yeah.
They're all criminals. Pick one of them.
I don't remember
to kill.
I don't remember
which is the right one to kill. Doesn't matter which one, but you get 3 options, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know there's a 4th option?
Oh, can you kill Astrid?
You can kill Astrid.
Oh, okay.
And what happens when you do this is it actually gets you on a quest chain to dismantle Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Which is not something I've done. I've learned about it and been like, I did not actually expect killing the assassin to be something you could do in that quest.
Right.
Because the quest says, man, kill one of these people. And it's like, okay, well, you get an option of which of the 3 to kill, but the 4th option's sitting behind you, and you can still kill her.
Right. In similar fashion, I would say if I go to, like Obsidian is a good example of this. You know, there are certain quest lines that you can do, and there are a couple different factions that you can usually do in those, if we're looking at, like, Outer Worlds or Fallout New Vegas. There's usually a couple options, but then there's usually also other options that the game doesn't necessarily tell you about, and that maybe the designers didn't necessarily intend for, but they put the mechanics in place so that you could. Like, for instance, in New Vegas, you can kill everybody in that game, and you can still complete the game. You can eliminate all of the factions, basically, if you want to, and it is going to change the interaction that the game has with you. It is not something that the game says you should do. They usually try to discourage you from it, but they also account for the fact that you might actually want to do it. So I would consider that to be emergent gameplay because it's not necessarily what the developers intended me to do, but they provided the mechanics in order for me to do it. Skyrim is a really good example of that, though. I mean, after you get through that first, what I would think is a fairly linear section, which is where you're escaping from being decapitated and you get out into the world, after that point, the world is sort of your oyster, and the stuff that you run across is not necessarily in the normal course of play what you would run across.
And I've had playthroughs that happen very, very differently.
Oh, yes.
And that's not even including mods like, Start Another Life, where you don't have to play as the Dragonborn. You can pick a different outlying, beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
like
a sailor.
Mod.
Oh, I was a barbarian. I was a thief.
Yeah. I like that mod
I'm no
a lot.
longer playing... Yeah, I'm no longer playing the Dragonborn. I'm playing a nomad.
Yeah.
A necromancer, even.
Yeah. Western RPGs, when they started developing those, took more of an idea of like the sandboxy sort of being able to go everywhere, more open world, and more options as to what you could do inside of that open world. There's a certain, like Final Fantasy is always a good example of the traditional JRPG. There is a storyline that you really have to follow, and there are story beats and very long cutscenes that you're going to go through in order to tell that story. It's not as clear-cut in Western RPGs, And that's by design, I think mostly because they're trying for a completely different experience for the user. In a lot of, like, the Final Fantasy games, for instance, you're embodying a character, and that character has a specific story that you're going through. In a lot of Western RPGs, you're creating a character, and you're building their story from playing the game. And it's not always going to be
pretty
the same.
blank slate in the Western RPGs.
Yeah.
At least the open-ended ones, you are generally
Sure.
a pretty blank slate.
Pretty blank slate, yeah. So that's probably one of the best places that, unfortunately, yes, my chatbot didn't necessarily give me any RPGs to go with. Good job, chat.
This is why we don't use these things.
Exactly.
You hear that, AI?
Yeah.
You're useless.
Just for the record, when they gave me the examples of Emergent gameplay, the little chatbot, every single one of its reference points is from Wikipedia.
Great source, thanks, Bing.
We came up with better examples than you did, damn it. Anyway, so just to kind of like cap this piece of the discussion off, almost any game is going to have some linear and some emergent elements, I think, unless it is a really rigid system. But what do you actually find yourself interacting with more positively?
I enjoy a bit of both, honestly. I enjoy Skyrim, for instance, as an example. I enjoy Fallout 4, though I've never finished it, because holy shit, I get bogged down every time.
You never found Sean?
No. I also really, definitely used to, don't know if I still do, but I enjoy like JRPGs, for instance. So linear can do a world of good as well. I think what I find myself missing these days are more linear RPGs and linear gameplay that drags you through the storyline, like I used to play on the PS2 era console.
Oh, sure.
Because back in those days, when the games were much smaller, to fit on a disc, they had to have a compact story. You know, it could be a long story, but it had to be more compact, and it was a linear story that took you through it. And so Final Fantasy X, where I said I had 300 hours, it's because I enjoyed it. The problem I have here with the open-ended games and the emergent gameplay aspect is that it is so open to the point that I do not have to interact with the story they are telling. So, for instance, I've played Skyrim several times.
Yeah.
I've only beaten the main story once.
Yes.
And that was when I sat down and said, all right, I'm going to do the main storyline with the dragons and the main storyline with the Civil War.
Yes.
And that way I can say I've played the two major, I consider those the two major storylines within the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally did it after probably 200 hours in the game or more, I would say.
Sure.
Now with a JRPG, it pulls you straight through it.
Right.
And I think that is used to be, at least, again, I don't play as much and I get bored of games super quickly these days. But those ones pull you through the story. So they have a story they want to tell, and they want you to fucking get the story out of the way.
Yeah.
They don't want you to sit there and dawdle doing something else.
Right.
So I enjoy both for different reasons.
Yes.
It depends on, I guess, the mood I'm in when I'm gaming.
Sure. I find it difficult to play games that are specifically, like, purely one or the other. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is because emergent gameplay is a lot of fun because you just fuck around with the systems in a lot of ways and, like, kind of try to outsmart the game itself, you know. And that's a lot of fun, and it gives you a lot of player agency. However, if you only have a game that does that, there's not enough structure for you to want to actually complete it or really keep you going through the game. And so you need some linear elements of, this is the mission you're going on that gets you to this next mission, that gets you to this next mission. And if you have fully linear games where it's just like go from point A to point B, I don't find it interesting enough for me to want to play. There's just not enough meat on the bones for me to want to go through it. So you kind of need to have a little bit of both, and if you aren't, maybe like, I wouldn't even say like a little bit of both. I would say maybe like 70% emergent kind of gameplay elements, and maybe 30% linear gameplay elements is good, because then you have enough spine to the game, but you really get to flesh it out as you're going through and play around with it. For me, that works, and it's the reason why... Maybe it's the reason why certain, like, Metroidvanias, and, like, that's one of my favorite genres, and why I like immersive sims, because there is a linearity to those to some degree, where you have to go through certain, points, but it also rewards exploration, and trying new things, and doing different things that, are not necessarily spelled out for you. So, I like that. But I'm wondering how everybody else feels. Do you like emergent gameplay? Do you like linear gameplay? How do you want them to interact with each other? Please tell us your thoughts on it in the comments down below or over on our Discord. We have a public Discord too, if you want to check that out.
Let us know what grinds your grind.
Yes, fine. Grind, I don't know if that's considered emergent or linear. I feel like it's just bad. Alex, wake up, we got one more class, and then we gotta get out of here. School is longer than I remember. These classes are forever. But we want to talk a little bit about an element of game design that I don't think we've really discussed on the show in any detail, which is about short versus long-term goals.
Yeah. Goal making is not my hobby.
No, it is not. And the thing about it is that we could probably talk about this in terms of video games, but I actually think that it's important when you're designing tabletop games more than anything. Because with the length of sessions that you'll go through and the length of campaigns, being able to set up long and short-term goals is pretty impressive and important.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about what those are. So your short-term goals are pretty straightforward. If I'm talking about, like, chess, it's about capturing a piece. I have one piece on the board and I need to capture it. If we're talking about a tabletop game, it might be I need to win this, governor over and get him to see things my way. I need to get enough money to buy the new sword. These are
I feel like for tabletop, short-term goals should probably be ones that you can, accomplish in like 1 or 2 sessions.
1 or 2 sessions, and a lot of times those short-term goals are going to have to be in league with the players themselves. Like, the players are almost going to have to set those up to some degree.
Yeah.
When it comes to the storyline, some of those short-term goals are the little steps that you have to take in order to complete larger quest lines. And being able to dole those out at a regular interval is really important to keep player engagement. The long-term goals are the overarching things that you're trying to accomplish, which is either the quest lines themselves or eventually the overall campaigns that you are on. And so you can have multiple long-term goals. That you can have the main overarching one, and then ones that go over several different story arcs that come to a completion. So, for instance, we'll use the game that we were playing where I was Max. Those have these individual cards. Was it Icespire Peak? I want to say it was Icespire Peak was the module. So. In that one, they give you basically these individual cards that are quests that you're going on. Completion of those individual cards is more of a long-term goal because you're going over multiple sessions. But the steps that you're taking to get there and the obstacles you're overcoming are more short-term goals you have to complete. And then there's a longer-term goal, which is that you have to defeat a dragon at the end. Which those...
I would say the quests are shorter term goals. I mean, we were taking multiple sessions to do them, but
Sure.
I feel like they were shorter term goals.
Okay. So in some ways, I think maybe there's even more categories. You have the micro term and the short term, and then
immediate
more long term
goals, short term, and long term.
Exactly. The blink term goals, which is the things that you are doing, you get into a combat. Completing the combat and defeating your enemy is a short-term
I feel like
goal.
we don't need to make really. I don't think we need to make micro goals.
We don't need to make micro goals.
Survive the combat.
Survive the combat.
Good goal.
Good goal. But that really just mostly plays into the idea of giving enough rewards to the players, or, you know, providing them with something to do both in the short term and in the long term. And theoretically, when I was looking through this, a lot of designers will talk about creating a mix of these so that those short-term goals will eventually merge into something larger. That all of these goals that you're trying to complete will eventually go into the long-term goals. Which, if we look at Icefire Peak, like you were saying, those individual missions inform the players of the world, but also give them the means necessary to complete a larger and more difficult set of goals that then lead to a larger set of goals, etc. Like you have a goal pyramid. You've created a goal pyramid. A golemid, exactly. This golemid we've created has a foundation of small things that you have to achieve that lead to larger things, and eventually the apex at the top of your golemid is indeed the end of the campaign, is like the overarching goal of the campaign that you need to achieve. Now, my question for you is, how often do we really need to be able to create and resolve something like a goal as a general rule? Like, if we're talking about short-term goals.
Oh boy, you're asking me how often I need to make goals?
You're the wrong person to ask for this, aren't you?
I'm the wrong person to ask for this.
Okay, so
I don't make goals, Nathan.
No, you. Okay, well then here's the thing. Do you expect the players to make goals for themselves?
If you've talked about that being a thing in your game, sure.
Okay.
I feel like if you set the expectations, especially if you're doing like a milestone EXP, for instance, in D&D, then setting goals is a good thing, because you can go, all right, what are the things your character wants to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
Or you want to accomplish with your character, if you'd rather do it that way. So these are some short-term goals for what your character wants to try to do, and then your long-term goals of what you want to get done, like later on down the road.
Right. Is it appropriate to talk to players about how these short-term goals they want to complete are going to go into the larger narrative? And
I feel like that should be fine, unless it involves them knowing things they shouldn't know.
Okay, so, like, I guess here's my scenario. I have my players in front of me, and I'm running the game, and I know where the game is going to go, and I know the general things that they want to do, or that they should be doing for the quest that they're on. And then the player goes, I want to get some new slacks. I just want to get, I gotta get new tights. And you say, okay, so you're gonna get new tights, but how is that going to, like, how does that actually relate to the quest that we're on? What are you gonna get out of it? It doesn't necessarily have to relate directly, but I'd like to know. I'd like to at least know if this is something directly related to the quest lines, or if this is a character-related thing, or how this is going to play in. And I do worry that might be a little bit metagaming, because it's like kind of like talking outside of the character interactions themselves.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of metagaming can be okay.
Yeah.
When it's not a lot of metagaming, and when it's not like going to influence the game itself really badly or anything like that. It really depends on the type of metagaming. Most people would say that knowing the weaknesses of your boss that you're gonna fight that you shouldn't know in game is bad metagaming. But like just knowing where your characters want to, where your players want to take your characters is good. But I feel it's not metagaming if it's knowledge that the GM would need to know to account for.
So we can say, like, you mentioned the weaknesses of bosses. So you could say that maybe the players have a short-term goal of uncovering what the weaknesses of the boss are. And your longer-term goal is defeating the boss. So if they set that as a short-term goal, how much time do we really want to devote to that to determine if they succeed or fail? Like, is that like a 1 or 2 session thing where maybe they're trying to come up with that knowledge, or
that could be a longer term goal if taking that boss guy down is like a very long, like the end of campaign goal, then sure.
Right. We're halfway up the Golem.
Yeah, maybe there is a complex web of things you need to do to learn that weakness.
Okay.
It could be several short goals long.
Sure. And that's the thing, is that I imagine short-term goals being things where you would have to stack several of them up in order to complete something that's more of a long-term goal. Thinking about this, so like Breath of the Wild, good example of this, is that you have a long-term goal. Ganon is a problem. You have to defeat Ganon.
It can be a short-term goal if you want to go beeline for Ganon.
Yeah. I mean, I would still say it's a long-term goal because it's the overarching thing that you're supposed to achieve in the game.
Sure.
But
if you want to play the game and just beeline straight for Ganon with your wooden stick, you can do it.
Good luck, but yeah.
People have done it.
People who are insane have done that.
Yeah.
But if you put in a bunch of short-term goals that are going to help you complete it, you might find that the long-term goal is easier to manage, or it's easier to understand what your long-term goal is, because especially in role-playing games, you might not actually know what your long-term goal is, and those short-term ones can help you. That does kind of get back to my whole question about, like, how many and how often do we need to start setting and resolving those shorter goals to keep player engagement? And I know what your answer is going to be. It depends.
Depends. I don't do a lot of goal setting ever in life. I've never done any goal setting. So, like, me answering that is not an easy ask.
Certainly. Yeah, no, I understand. I usually will wake up with a set of goals that I will probably not achieve, but I guess it is for a longer term thing in the game of life, which, maybe we shouldn't... The gamification of life is a whole other subject to talk about at some point, but I guess, yeah, in some ways our lives are about, like, creating short-term and long-term goals, just, like, outside of gaming itself. We will set up short-term goals about, like, well, I gotta put on my pants. And that is, sometimes that's a hard...
on my pants.
Sometimes that's a hard goal. You're just like going...
Definitely.
Why do I have to do that? And yet, we do have to do it, because if you don't complete those short-term goals, your long-term goal of going out to shop is going to be much trickier for you if you haven't completed.
a little bit harder as a treat.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that are going, you didn't complete those short-term goals. Now you're walking around without pants in the store. That's not good. When I'm doing workflow, too, I will kind of have, okay, I need to record, I need to edit, I need to do these steps in order to achieve my long-term goal, and my long-term goal is that I produce a podcast, and I produce a video, and that's going to lead into a larger thing. So, in some ways, the human brain is naturally set up so that it can, handle short versus long-term progression systems, but it can be very easy to forget that we need to do that in games, because that is something that people are going to... If you just said, here's the long-term goal, don't worry about the short terms, it's going to be harder for players to engage with the system, because it's this long span of not really achieving anything specific. So, you could still have your combats, you could still have all of that stuff, but the completion of a goal is that dopamine that gets you saying, oh, okay, I'm in it. I'm still in it. And I have something larger that I'm trying to accomplish, and I've achieved something towards it.
Yeah, it would be wonderful if I could set goals so I could get that dopamine hit from completing goals.
That's right. And the more difficult a task, the better
Setting
it
goals
is.
is the
Yeah. We're gonna set the goal to set goals. Your long-term goal is to set a bunch of short-term goals.
I guess some people with ADHD actually have to like plan time to plan time.
Yeah.
Or set goals to set goals, for instance, and it's like that's a thing.
You know what? It's the goalamid. It's our goalamid.
The bottom rung of the goalamid is goal setting as a goal.
Exactly. It's a goal. And if you do goal setting, if you say I'm going to do goal setting, you've automatically won. There's something.
No, you don't, because I don't follow through with that shit.
Then you failed entirely. Okay.
Welcome to my life.
As we approach the end of the year, though, it's probably a good time to talk about some goal setting. So if you have goals that you are hoping to achieve in the new year, let us know, whether they be short-term or long-term.
Or if you have a whole goal limit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny, every time we say goalamid, I think of a golem and id. So it's like the base preternatural sensory of golems.
It's like a golem with like a triforce in it, but it's just a pyramid of goals.
Pyramid of golems.
Yeah. Golem pyramid, yeah.
Golem pyramid, yeah. Just golems all the way down. Alright, everybody, this has been our masterclass on game design. I don't think that's true.
This has been our episode on doing episodes.
This has been our TED Talk about doing TED Talks.
Perfect. I'm here for it.
Alex, if folks wanted to find out more about our other masterclasses that we've done, where could they go?
Oh dear, somewhere else. You can go to totalpebbleknockdown.com, where we have all of our stuff posted up there, and all of our links and all that good stuff up there.
Yeah, all of the good stuff. You can also check out our Patreon and see early episodes of the show, as well as some of the bonus content that we cut out of the show. So check us out over there. You can find us on every podcast app known to mankind. Please rate and review and subscribe where it is necessary. And you can also find us on the ever-increasing wasteland that is social media. I am at Titanium.
I am tired from this class, but I am EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
Well, I hope I hope you get some sleep, some rest up for the test that I'm going to give you tomorrow.
Ooh, I'm good at testing.
There's going to be a pop quiz that I'm telling you about now. Open secret.
Great. So, goal setting bad, studying bad, but man, do I pass tests.
Yes, there you go. You didn't even need to set a goal, you just passed it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The goal was 100 and I got 99, close enough.
Have you ever completed a game and it'd be like, oh yeah, you got 99% of the stuff done, you missed like one audio file or something, and you're like, oh no.
I don't care about percenting games.
Yeah. Ever since Assassin's Creed 2, I stopped caring about it. I'm not collecting 200
games
feathers.
Games are so big these days.
Yeah, exactly.
That is just like, no, I don't care. Like, as long as I get the story done, it's like, whatever. If I want to try to 100% it some other... Like with Nier Automata, where it's got, 50, 100 endings?
No, it has, however many letters are in the alphabet.
26 endings? I'm not going to go
endings.
for 26 endings.
Most of them are gags, anyway.
Yeah, I'm not spending the time to do that.
There are 5 actual endings.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Until next time, folks, thank you for coming to our class. Don't
expect another one.
School's
closed.
No, this was episode 101. That's it. 102, something completely different. Sorry. The school is closed. We lost all funding. It turned out to be a Golemid scheme. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.